to Snoozecast, the podcast designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on Instagram at Snoozecast to find behind-the-scenes content. If you'd like to get an email once a week with upcoming sleep stories and other news, subscribe to the Snoozeletter at snoozecast.com. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and by Gossamer and Primroses. Tonight, we'll read the next part to The Princess and the Goblin, a children's fantasy novel published in 1872. If you'd like an easy way to listen to these continuing episodes in order, go to snoozecast.com/series. When we left off, our little hero Curdie had been spying on the goblins in their cave system under the mountains. He stumbled upon the royal family and was captured and kept prisoner by them. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. The goblins had left their fire burning, and the light came through the tiny hole into Curdie's prison cell brighter than before. Curdie thought it was time to try again if anything could be done. But he found he could not get even a finger through the chink between the slab and the rock. All he could do was to sit down and think again. By and by, he came to the resolution to pretend to be sick, in the hope they might take him out before his strength was too much exhausted to let him have a chance. Meantime, until they should come again at night, there was nothing for him to do but forge new rhymes, now his only weapons. He had no intention of using them at present, of course, but it was well to have a stock, for he might live to want them, and the manufacture of them would help to while away the time. Chapter 20. Irene's Clue. That same morning, early, the princess awoke suddenly. There was a noise in her room, creatures snarling and hissing and rocketing about as if they were fighting. The moment she came to herself, she remembered something she had never thought of again, what her grandmother told her to do when she was frightened. She immediately took off her ring and put it under her pillow. As she did, she fancied she felt a finger and thumb take it gently from under her palm. "It must be my grandmother," she said to herself, and the thought gave her such courage that she stopped to put on her dainty little slippers before running from the room. While doing this, she caught sight of a long cloak of sky blue thrown over the back of a chair by the bedside. She had never seen it before, but it was evidently waiting for her. She put it on, and then, feeling with the forefinger of her right hand, soon found her grandmother's thread, which she proceeded at once to follow, expecting it would lead her straight up the old stair. When she reached the door, she found it went down and ran along the floor, so that she had almost to crawl in order to keep a hold of it. Then, to her surprise, and somewhat to her dismay, she found that instead of leading her towards the stair, it turned in quite the opposite direction. It led her through certain narrow passages towards the kitchen, turning aside ere she reached it, and guiding her to a door which communicated with a small backyard. Some of the maids were already up, and this door was standing open. Across the yard, the thread still ran along the ground until it brought her to a door in the wall which opened upon the mountainside. When she had passed through, the thread rose to about half her height, and she could hold it with ease as she walked. It led her straight up the mountain. The cause of her alarm, back when she woke up in bed, was the cook's great black cat, pursued by the housekeeper's terrier, which had bounced against her bedroom door, which had not been properly fastened. The two had burst into the room together and commenced a battle royale. How the nurse came to sleep through it was a mystery, but I suspect the old lady upstairs had something to do with it. It was a clear, warm morning. The wind blew deliciously over the mountainside. Here and there, she saw a late primrose, but she did not stop to call upon them. The sky was mottled with small clouds. The sun was not up yet, but some of their fluffy edges had caught his light and hung out orange and gold-colored fringes upon the air. The dew lay in round drops upon the leaves and hung like tiny diamond earrings from the blades of grass about her path. How lovely that bit of gossamer is, thought the princess, looking at a long, undulating line that shone at some distance from her up the hill. It was not the time for gossamers, though, and Irene soon discovered that it was her own thread she saw shining on before her in the light of the morning. It was leading her she not knew where, but she had never in her life been out before sunrise, and everything was so fresh and cool and lively and full of something coming that she felt too happy to be afraid of anything. After leading her up a good distance, the thread turned to the left and down the path upon which she and Ludi had met Curdie. But she never thought of that, for now in the morning light, with its far outlook over the country, no path could have been more open and airy and cheerful. She could see the road almost to the horizon, along which she had so often watched her king papa and his troop come shining, with the bugle blast cleaving the air before them, and it was like a companion to her. Down and down the path went, then up, and then down, and then up again, getting rugged and more rugged as it went. And still along the path went the silvery thread, and still along the thread went Irene's little rosy-tipped forefinger. By and by, she came to a little stream that jabbered and prattled down the hill, and up the side of the stream went both path and thread, and still the path grew rougher and steeper, and the mountain grew wilder, till Irene began to think she was going a very long way from home. And when she turned to look back, she saw that the level country had vanished, and the rough, bare mountain had closed in about her. But still on went the thread, and on went the princess. Everything around her was getting brighter and brighter as the sun came nearer, till at last his first rays all at once alighted on the top of a rock before her, like some golden creature fresh from the sky. Then she saw that the little stream ran out of a hole in that rock, that the path did not go past the rock, and that the thread was leading her straight up to it. A shudder ran through her from head to foot when she found that the thread was actually taking her into the hole out of which the stream ran. It ran out babbling joyously, but she had to go in. She did not hesitate. Right into the hole she went, which was high enough to let her walk without stooping. For a little way there was a brown glimmer, but at the first turn it all but ceased, and before she had gone many paces, she was in total darkness. Every moment she kept feeling the thread backwards and forwards, and as she went farther and farther into the darkness of the great hollow mountain, she kept thinking more and more about her grandmother and all that she had said to her, and how kind she had been, and how beautiful she was, and all about her lovely room, and the fire of roses, and the great lamp that sent its light through stone walls. And she became more and more sure that the thread could not have gone there of itself, and that her grandmother must have sent it. But it tried her dreadfully when the path went down very steep, and especially when she came to places where she had to go down rough stairs, and even sometimes a ladder. Through one narrow passage after another, over lumps of rock and sand and clay, the thread guided her until she came to a small hole through which she had to creep. Finding no change on the other side, "Shall I ever get back?" she thought over and over again, and often feeling as if she were only walking in the story of a dream. Sometimes she heard the noise of water, a dull gurgling inside the rock. By and by, she heard the sounds of blows, which came nearer and nearer. But again they grew duller and almost died away. In 100 directions she turned, obedient to the guiding thread. At last she spied a dull red shine and came up to the mica window, and thence away and round about, and right into a cavern where glowed the embers of an old fire. Here the thread began to rise. It rose as high as her head, and higher still. What should she do if she lost her hold? She was pulling it down. She might break it. She could see it far up, glowing as red as her fire opal in the light of the embers. But presently she came to a huge heap of stones piled in a slope against the wall of the cavern. On these she climbed and soon recovered the level of the thread, only however to find the next moment that it vanished through the heap of stones and left her standing on it with her face to the solid rock. For one moment she felt as if her grandmother had forsaken her. The thread which the spiders had spun far over the seas, which her grandmother had sat in the moonlight and spun again for her, which she had tempered in the rose fire and tied to her opal ring, had left her, had gone where she could no longer follow it, had brought her into a cavern, and there left her. She was forsaken indeed. "When shall I wake?" she said to herself in agony, but the same moment knew that it was no dream. She threw herself upon the heap and began to cry. It was well she did not know what creatures, one of them with stone shoes on her feet, were lying in the next cave. But neither did she know who was on the other side of the slab. At length the thought struck her that at least she could follow the thread backwards, and thus get out of the mountain and home. She rose at once and found the thread, but the instant she tried to feel it backwards, it vanished from her touch. Forwards it led her hand up to the heap of stones. Backwards it seemed nowhere. Neither could she see it as before in the light of the fire. She burst into a wailing cry and again threw herself down on the stones. Chapter 21. The Escape. As the princess lay and sobbed, she kept feeling the thread mechanically, following it with her finger many times up to the stones in which it disappeared. By and by, she began, still mechanically, to poke her finger in after it between the stones as far as she could. All at once, it came into her head that she might remove some of the stones and see where the thread went next. Almost laughing at herself for never having thought of this before, she jumped to her feet. Once more, she was certain her grandmother's thread could not have brought her there just to leave her there, and she began to throw away the stones from the top as fast as she could, sometimes 2 or 3 at a handful, sometimes taking both hands to lift one. After clearing them away a little, she found that the thread turned and went straight downwards. Hence, as the heap sloped a good deal, growing of course wider towards its base, she had to throw away a multitude of stones to follow the thread. But this was not all, for she soon found that the thread, after going straight down for a little way, turned sideways in one direction, then sideways in another, and then shot at various angles hither and thither inside the heap, so that she began to be afraid that to clear the thread she must remove the whole huge gathering. She was dismayed at the very idea, but, losing no time, set to work with a will, and with aching back, she worked on, sustained by the pleasure of seeing the heap slowly diminish and begin to show itself on the opposite side of the fire. Another thing which helped to keep up her courage was that, as often as she uncovered a turn of the thread, instead of lying loose upon the stone, it tightened up. This made her sure that her grandmother was at the end of it somewhere. She had got about halfway down when she started, and nearly fell with surprise. Close to her ears, as it seemed, a voice broke out singing, "Jabber, bother, smash, you'll have it all in a crash. Jabber, smash, bother, you'll have the worst of the pother. Smash, bother, jabber." Here Curdie stopped, either because he could not find a rhyme to jabber, or because he remembered what he had forgotten when he woke up at the sound of Irene's labors, that his plan was to make the goblins think he was getting weak. But he had uttered enough to let Irene know who he was. "It's Curdie," she cried joyfully. "Hush, hush. came Curdie's voice again from somewhere. "Speak softly." "Why, you were singing aloud," said Irene. "Yes, but they know I am here, and they don't know you are. Who are you?" "I'm Irene," answered the princess. "I know who you are quite well. You're Curdie." "Why, however did you come here, Irene?" "My great-great-grandmother sent me, and I think I've found out why." "You can't get out, I suppose?" "No, I can't." "What are you doing?" "Clearing away a huge heap of stones." "There's a princess," exclaimed Curdie, in a tone of delight, but still speaking in little more than a whisper. "I can't think how you got here, though." "My grandmother sent me after her thread." "I don't know what you mean," said Curdie, "but so you're there, it doesn't much matter." "Oh, yes, it does," returned Irene. "I should never have been here but for her." "Well, you can tell me all about it when we get out, then. There's no time to lose now," said Curdie. And Irene went to work, as fresh as when she began. "There's such a lot of stones," she said. "It'll take me a long time to get them all away." "How far on have you got?" asked Curdie. "I've got about the halfway, but the other half is ever so much bigger." "I don't think you'll have to move the lower half. Do you see a slab laid up against the wall?" Irene looked and felt about with her hands, and soon perceived the outlines of the slab. "Yes," she answered, "I do." "Then I think," rejoined Curdie, "when you have cleared the slab about halfway down, or a bit more, I shall be able to push it over." "I must follow my thread," returned Irene, "whatever I do." "What do you mean?" exclaimed Curdie. "You will see when you get out," answered the princess, and went on harder than ever. But she was soon satisfied that what Curdie wanted done and what the thread wanted done were one and the same thing. For she not only saw that by following the turns of the thread, she had been clearing the face of the slab, but that, a little more than halfway down, the thread went through the chink between the slab and the wall into the place where Curdie was confined, so that she could not follow it any farther until the slab was out of her way. As soon as she found this, she was right joyous.